Alright, today we're going to be talking about post-processing. And I'm going to give you an example here of a project that I actually did for a competition but never submitted. I don't think I was happy with it, and I flagged it in the end. In hindsight, it probably wasn't as bad as I thought it was. But I thought it would be a brilliant idea to show you guys the process that I work through. Now, some of this is using software that you don't have, but I am going to go through this in Photoshop and show you how we can do it in there as well. But I thought I'd show you it this way because if you ever wanted to get into the film industry, you'd have to be working with node-based compositing programs. This particular one that I've used is Shake. It's a little bit embarrassing actually using Shake because it got end-of-lined in 2009. And people would probably more these days use Nuke. But Nuke costs about $4,000 or $5,000, and I don't have that much money, but I do have a copy of Shake, and I can do everything in it that I need to do. So yeah, I still use it on a regular basis. However, you will probably appreciate this workflow because I can really show quite clearly everything that I do to create my images. So, first of all, let's start off in view. So here's the scene in view. I just did a quick render of it just with budget settings. Actually, I think I lost the material off this pillar, and so the pillars turned black, and then I decided I actually kind of like them black, so I just left them like that. So that's why the white in here. Of course, when I opened up the program, it found the texture and put it back on again. So, and I just played around with the grass ecosystem to try and speed up my render time, but it looks terrible now. So it doesn't matter. Anyway, let's just close this for a second. So, actually, before I close it, you can kind of see what's going on here. I've got an imported model, which is the hard landscaping. I've brought in another model here, which is actually a 3D scan of a statue that I own. I've also got here some orange trees that are just straight from the view library. I've made up some ecosystems here of coloured flowers, and I've got it so that they're planting kind of in this linear pattern, and I've got these little hedges. Now this was meant to be for a Renaissance type of competition, a Renaissance image competition, and normally if I'm doing a competition or any project really, I'll have a bunch of reference pictures, so, and I kind of use these sort of, so I kind of know where I should be heading and what my textures and objects should be looking like in the real world. So, and I usually just jump on Google image search and have a little hunt around. So in this case, sort of Renaissance images. Funnily enough, it came up with all these ones of Hamilton Gardens, which is my old stomping ground. It's where I studied. It's one of the gardens down there. There's lots of other ones, so you can kind of see there's these little hedges and these little short hedges and concentric paths and things like that. And so I kind of used that as an influence of my design, water features, that sort of care. I wanted to get some more of these pots, statues, these kind of cypress, I think they're cypress trees, aren't they? We used to always call them painters' trees because you always see them in paintings everywhere. Okay, so that's what's kind of influenced, if you like, the design of this scene. All right. Now, when I go to render it, though, I actually render out using this thing here called Enable Multipass Render. And it gives me the ability to spit out all sorts of things, okay? And I'm going to go through this, and I'll show you exactly what happens when we render an image. And I'll be showing this in Photoshop. There's all sorts of components that we can spit out, which is very, very handy for doing compositing. And it's probably one of the most powerful things about doing compositing, especially if you're doing renders that take forever to spit out. Hence, that's why I was just trying to speed up my render time. I can't remember. Actually, it might actually be in here. Let's just cancel this. Cancel this. Cancel this. Bring this open. Oh, that's a bit weird. Where's my little... There we go. Sorry, you're going to see my dirty laundry now. Possibly in here. No, because of course this is this paper is in my View Extreme license. But yeah, I could have pulled up how long it took to render. It probably took a few hours, I imagine. Anyway, when I go and spit this all out, this is what I get. Okay, so here's my reference pictures. It's my objects that I've exported. And here's all of my different layers. Now you can actually see these are all, I don't know why the Photoshop document's a bit odd for me to do that. Oh, here we go. Material ID. Okay, so this is brilliant. It gives you a different color for each of the different materials. So you can see here that there's a different shade of green. These are actually all different shades of green for all the different materials. Okay, and shades of purple. So if I wanted to select all of the flower gardens, okay, I just simply select this orange color and I'd select all those flower gardens. If I wanted to select all the cypress trees, I just use my magic wand, or actually sorry, I'd use select by color range and I'd be able to select them all. It's very convenient. And we've got object IDs as well. So each object, I might have to open this up in Photoshop. Must be this one. Now notice the file size, 486 megabytes. Okay, so it does, turning all these things on does produce really large Photoshop documents. So what I tend to do is I will split these out as individual files. So we just have a little look back in View Infinite in the render settings. See here it's got separate files. For some reason I've spat it out as a Photoshop document, which is a bit slack of me. I usually change that to TIFF. And it will go through and export each of these things out as a separate image. Now, if you're just doing a still image and it's going into Photoshop, then doing a Photoshop document, sorry, where is it? Here, a multi-layered Photoshop document and goes out to one file. Brilliant. Okay, you can see here it's going to do 16 layers, no extra channels. Okay, if I started switching other things on, like I might want a mask for layer 1, so everything on layer 1 would have a mask. Kind of pointless. We've only got one layer. But see, I could spit out an extra layer just for my the ecosystem on my Venus statue. Okay, and so you should see we end up with an extra channel in there. No. Okay, it's probably come out as a layer, or it's just not updating properly. Object masks, layer masks, material masks. There you go. See, that's producing now. Okay, so it's very convenient, and we'll have a look in Photoshop because that should be open now. Ooh, seems a little bit broken, doesn't it? Actually, I think I was having problems with this. Where is it breaking? It might be my color. Material ID, color, diffuse. I might have to render something off for you guys. Maybe this is why I changed it. Yeah, so it looks like the diffuse layer has got issues. So normally what would happen is I'd have a color layer here, and then on top of that, each extra layer. Let's just see if I've got a diffuse layer sitting in here. It'd be nice just to show this off. Diffuse. That doesn't look good. I wonder what's happened there. It's very odd. Anyway. I'm not sure what's happened there. But the reason I actually wanted to show you this is, in fact, I might just have to render off a new scene. Give me a second. Alright, so here's my render. So I've turned radiosity off and all sorts of other bits and pieces just to speed it up. Otherwise I'd be here forever. But here you go. Now, what we normally see, I'm just going to switch off all of this. What we normally see when we render is this image here, okay? This is my color image. And what it's actually doing to produce this is, first of all, it gets a diffuse color pass. So this diffuse color pass is basically the base color of something. And then it's going to do a whole bunch of other things on top of it. And so each pass that you can see here is what gets put into any 3D imaging program actually. So I'll just turn the rest of these off. So for example, our specular highlights, remember those guys? Well, look, you can switch these on and off. So you can see, like, for example, our trees have some specular highlights. So remember, that's that little shine that happens when the sun hits it at a particular angle. It also calculates where all the shadows would be. Okay, and so when I switch these shadows on, you can see all it's doing is it's actually multiplying this shadows layer. If I go and switch this to normal, that's what it's produced. It's actually an entire image of just shadows. It then multiplies that over the top of our specular and our diffuse. Okay, so if I change this back to multiply, oops, I'll switch it on first. What it's saying is that if you imagine white is 1 and black is 0. So a simple example of this would be, if I go and create a new document here, maybe not that big, let's go 400 by 400. Alright, here you go. I've made like a little strange little diagram here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change the blending mode of this. So if I change this to multiply, right, you'll notice that our white area disappeared and our black shape stayed the same. What's happening is that white is 1. So black times 1 is black. White, or 1, times 1 is 1. Grey, or mid-grey, is 1, is like, say 0.5 times 1 is 0.5. So it's not changing the colour. However, if we do the same thing with our black colour, you'll notice that that's times 0. So it's always going to be black. So if we multiply something, we'll only see the darker areas. Anything that's white will stay exactly as it was. If I change this to screen, you'll notice that the black circle disappears. Okay? So what's happening is that this is adding values. So if I add white, okay, or 1 to black is 1. 1 times 1 plus 1 is, well, actually, it's more than 1, but our maximum value can only be 1, so it's white. We'll get into that one day, but that's what the screening process does, is adding these values together. And so our black circle disappeared because it's 0. White plus 0, okay, 1 plus 0 is 1. 0.5, okay, which is our grey, plus 0 is 0.5. So multiply and add have two quite different effects. Okay, you're probably used to normal, where it just adds both of these values, just puts them straight over the top, as if they're, a black and white shape. Alright, so let's just pop back then to our little demo here. So here we can see that this, if we multiply our shadows, if it will let us, it's gone and locked for some reason. It does this sometimes, and I don't know how to turn the locking off. Program error. Fick. Oh, let's just go. There we go. Undo. Shadows. See, so the shadows are being multiplied over the top. The cool thing with this, though, is that we can actually fade it out. So that would make our shadows lighter or darker. Alright, so let's just keep moving along. Here's our ambient light. So this is indirect lighting. Okay, so you can see areas that the sun isn't hitting are getting lit with this ambient light. This is quite important in this pass because we don't have a radiosity pass, which would be a little bit more interesting. Refractions, well, we're not going to have any refractions. Oh yes, we do. The pool water. Okay, so it's the way that the light is bending as it goes through. So again, if I go and change this to normal, now you can actually see what that layer looks like. So it's actually, if I go undo, it's actually screening that or adding that effect over the top of the colour of the water. Here we have reflections. I'm going to turn these ones off. Okay, so again, you can see in the water, it's being added, which is exactly the process of what a reflection is. A reflection is adding of light. So if I shine a white light into a mirror, it'll get bounced off and we'll see a reflection of it. If I try and shine black light, or no light, it doesn't reflect, and so I won't get a reflection. So if you put something black behind your pool, you just won't get a reflection. If it was any other colour, it would reflect because it's adding light. Here's our background, which in this case we can't see, but that would be our sky or whatever. Indirect lighting. Again, we didn't do. If we did a radiosity pass, this would be a little bit more interesting. And we've got an atmosphere filter here as well, which again isn't doing much. Let's just turn on all these things. So might not be able to see it. Here we go. There's a little bit of a darkening effect almost happening there, which is a bit strange. Atmosphere gain, okay, which is actually a screened effect again, and it's just kind of making it almost smoky effect happening here. And then we've got some post-processing. This would be your outer glows. What else gets post-processed? Post-processed. Yeah, usually an outer glow or a lens flare, I think, is post-processed. So the effects are added over the top. Anyway, so you can composite your own images together, and the cool thing with that is it's like, this took 2 days to render, and I don't like how much atmosphere gain there is. You can just dial it back, okay? You could of course then go over the top of this whole thing and add some Photoshop effects, which I don't think I really need to go into. I might do later on, but not right now. Alright, so let's go back now. Actually no, before I do that, let's have a look at the other stuff that we've got here. We've got a few other layers in here. Here's one that's called Z depth. Okay, and Z depth is a very normal thing to export. It's basically a black and white image that shows the depth of things, and it's very handy for doing things like a blur. Okay, because I can go select color range, and if I select the foreground, I can adjust my fuzziness. I can select everything in the foreground, just like that. And so now, if I turn that off and go back to my color channel here, I can go. Actually, just make sure I click on my color channel. It's locked again. I don't know why. I can go filter blur, but it's not going to let me, is it? Oh, yeah, there you go. Maybe not that much. And I can defocus the foreground. Okay, or everything that's in the front. Very convenient. In fact, Photoshop has a very cool thing, and I don't know why. I don't think you can do it from here. Hang on, so I'll just have a look. I think it's got to be a channel. But if I go, oops. Select our image and go filter, blur, lens blur, source. Yeah, I need a channel. So all I'm going to do is go to my Z depth, go select all, copy, and flick into my channels, create a new channel. And go paste, and I'll just leave it as alpha 1 because I'm lazy. Deselect, put that back to RGB, turn that off, and oops, go back down here to my color mask. Right, so back to where we started. So the only difference is my Z depth is now in one of the channels, and I can go view. Oh, sorry, filter. Blur, lens blur. Turn. Here it pops up, and now I can say alpha 1. And I should be able to actually click on this. I can click on any part of my image. And look, see, it's doing a depth of, or it's doing like a focusing effect. Pretty cool, eh? I'm going to talk a little bit more about focus a little bit later. See how that's kind of moving it around? And it's all got a whole bunch of different types of setting. How much it gets blurred. You can actually, in here as well, you can actually add noise and grain and stuff as well. Which is kind of cool. Yeah, I usually add a little bit of noise. See that noise that's coming through? Okay, usually I'd add a very small amount of noise. Okay, and I usually use monochromatic noise rather than, you'll notice if I bump this right up, see it's got this real coloured look to it. Monochromatic, it doesn't have that those colours in it. I suppose you could, but I prefer this. It looks quite nice. If you get sort of around the 5%, okay, you can see no blur, 5%, and that's kind of cool. Just kind of adds a little bit something to it. And there's also uniform and Gaussian. Again, I think I usually use uniform. There's specular highlights, which is to do with the focus. It kind of should blow some of the bright lights out. You can kind of see in the background. See that? So it's kind of blowing these out. You can change the shape of this. It's just going to give kind of a different sort of effect. Okay, you can see it's kind of blocky and square. Yeah, octagonal. Just use whatever you like, really. Blade curvature. So this is all to do with the iris, which is aptly named iris. Okay. You can have a good old play around with that. This has much more of an effect if it's a really dark scene with bright lights in it, like kind of like, you know, street lights in the distance. But yeah, it's a very handy little little filter, that one. But you can do it manually. All right, let's have a look through here as well. See, we've got XY normals. So this is basically the stuff on the left is red, the stuff on the right is green. And of course, flat stuff doesn't really come into it. That's what XYZ normals are all about. The cool thing with this is that, let's say I wanted to select all of the right, or maybe the faces in this direction. What I do is just go select color range and click on there, and if I go and start increasing my fuzziness, I'm selecting all of the colors, all of the sides, so all these front facing sides, right? That's all the sides facing me on everything. Ecosystems, the whole lot. So if I wanted to sort of say, well, actually, I want to kind of select these sides. Let's just increase the fuzziness here. I don't know what's happening through here. It's a bit weird. Oh, that's the, yeah, that's totally normal. Okay, so I can select all those sides and darken them, for example. So let's say, I'm just going to switch that off again. And let's add a exposure. Okay, now notice because I added selection, it's automatically created me a mask for my exposure, and I can darken all of those edges. Okay, so I don't know why I would, but okay, so now I'm darkening all of the faces pointing in that direction. See if I switch it on and off. Pretty incredible, isn't it? So very handy to have. Likewise, you know, it could be the top surfaces or the bottom surfaces. Sometimes, you know, if you've got things that are pointing down, you want to darken them a little bit. We've got UVW coordinates. Now this is actually to do with the texture space. So in this case, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, the UV maps. This is kind of like as if it's mapping out where the textures are placed on the surface. Again, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do that in this case. Material color. So this is the colors that are being applied to everything. Okay, so this is when you go and choose your colors for your objects. These are the colors that are being produced. It's not much difference really to this diffuse, really, is it? It just doesn't have the shadows and stuff on it. You could probably make up your own looking, kind of more cartoony looking things. If I go and add shadows, see that's shadows over the just the straight color of it. Yeah, and so you could actually go and make a scene that looks a little bit more a little different, doesn't it? What else have we got in here? Material ID and objects IDs. So they're quite convenient. See, so every object has its own color. So again, if I just wanted to select one, now I'd have to put the fuzziness on 0. But actually, let's just put this none. See, so I can select that, and I'm selecting just that one tree, okay, or that one plant. If I want that base, click, boom. Looks like there's something that must be very similar. Maybe it's running out of colors. Okay, if I want that tree, one click, boom, got it. Selected. Screen space velocity. If something was moving through my scene, you'd actually see it as a different color, which would be pretty cool. Material ID. Okay, so again, if I wanted to select all of the oranges, okay, select color range, I can just click on an orange. Hit OK. No. Select color range. I might have to zoom in there a little bit. That's interesting. Select color range. That works. That works. Right. Alright. Oh, there it goes. Fuzziness 0. Okay. Don't know why it's not doing it, but anyway, get the idea. Okay, I've got all those regions selected. See, even that one has the same surface on it. I've also put in here a couple of masks. And so here you can actually see it's gone and spat out the actual texture. I think I had some sort of material growing over the top of it. So there's all the concrete. It's a very low res render, so it hasn't come out very clearly. The ecosystem that I have growing on top of my Venus statue. So if I put that on top of that, yeah, actually, I don't know why this is locking itself, but anyway. Okay, but there it is. There's the ecosystem. So I've got these plants sort of growing over the top of the statue, and there's the statue all by itself. Very convenient. There's my exposure. You also see in here I've got some channels. So there's masks that I exported. So there's a mask for the statue. Here's all of my concrete. Okay, so when you do that mask, not only does it spit out all the concrete, it spits out a black and white image, so you can isolate these things as well. Okay, and there's that Z depth I created earlier. So there's lots of things. So we'll come back to this in a second. Let's just go over to Shake here, and I'm going to show you what I did. And we'll try and reproduce it in Photoshop as well. So, Shake is a node-based editing program. And if I just have a look here, you can see, actually I'll just fit this, all of the stuff that I've done. Sorry, I can't remember how to, I guess, don't know why I was doing that. Middle mouse button to move around and shake. Okay, so normally you'd be using Nuke or some other compositing program if you're doing node-based editing, but I wanted to show you this because you can really see how I've done it. So, over here, what I've got is, why isn't that updating? Oh, because what you can see here is it looks like the material ID that we saw before. Okay, so I'm using this to isolate certain things. So in this case, what I've done, why isn't this updating? Update, always. This should be updating automatically. There we go. Oh, that's because it's chroma key. If I flick over to the alpha channel. See, basically what I've done is I've chroma keyed something. I've chroma keyed the pink color, okay, which is this color here, to isolate the concrete. Okay, so I've pulled out all the concrete. Alright, now, I've inverted this for some reason. Probably because I wanted it to be white, not black, because the chroma key would remove it from it. I want to add it. Okay, I've also got an edge detect here, so I'm actually detecting the edges of my of my material ID. See, so it's identifying sort of all these edges around here, and then I'm blurring that, and then I'm copying the two over to each other. So what I have effectively done, I've copied the alpha channel and then I multiplied it. What I've effectively done, so I'm taking this, multiplying it by this, and getting this as my output. Okay, so in other words, the edge of my concretes. So I could do this exactly the same thing in Photoshop, because if I go to my material ID, material ID, if I go filter, now what is it called in here? Stylize, is it? Find edges. Okay, same thing. See, so it's finding all the edges. So problem is that this find edges isn't very smart, and it's, you got to play around with it. Whereas the find edges in here has got lots of settings that I can play around with. The other advantage is that I can actually look at my output and then play around with what I did at this step. So yeah, it's just got a little bit more control, I suppose you could say. If I increase its strength, you can see it darkening the edges there. Pretty cool, eh? So I could do that, and then maybe this blur needs to be increased if I increase that. Yeah. So that's why I like to use these kind of node-based editing programs, because I can go to any step in my process and play around with it. Alright, so what filter have we got going on here? It's doing something. I'm not sure what. It looks like I'm doing a slight blur, a 1 pixel blur, probably just to get rid of some of the noise by the look of it. Alright, and so once I've got that, what I'm doing is quite simple. I'm just fading this image. Okay, so I'm fading the image, but it's actually using, so if I pull this out, right, how do I ignore my mask? There you go, ignore node. No, I want to just ignore the mask, don't I? There you go. See, so I'm fading the whole image, but I'm using this as a mask, so that means that it'll only fade it in these areas, okay, or these areas here, if you like. It's fading all those areas. So that means that I can just come over to here now, and if I want to darken it or lighten it, one slider. Pretty cool, eh? And so that's darkening all the edges around here. Then I've done the same thing effectively, but for alpha, the vertical edges. See, this got a different material, so I've done exactly the same thing, but for these other surfaces. So eventually I'll end up with, let me show me. Oh, sorry, I got the color. Okay, but now I'm doing it for these surfaces and at this level. Okay, so again, okay, so it's just adding that effect, so you can see it happening here. Now, yes, I could have actually made a texture that like looked at the object below and that sort of carry on to get this effect, but it took a long time to render. I've got a lot of control. I can play around with this afterwards, which is very cool. What have I got happening down here? Oh, this is my depth map. So here's my depth map that we saw before, and I'm actually keying out the background. So I was trying to blur the background and blur the foreground. Okay, so I get this kind of combined effect. So I'm just adding these two keys together. So I'm saying blur this area and this area. Okay, if I don't like this too much, I can look. So it's doing a blur at this stage. Okay, which means I can go over to here and go, well, what happens if I adjust this? Maybe I want this a little bit more in focus in the foreground, and maybe I want to make this area a little bit less focused. Yeah. So effectively what I'm doing is I'm playing around with this. Okay, so maybe I just want to do just the background. There we go. Cool. Okay, so now just the background's being done. And then finally I've got a shape here, which I've inverted, blurred, probably need to blur a lot more actually. And it's vignetting my whole effect. So again, if I want to blur that more though, oopsies, that's my fade I'm changing. Because I can look over here and then adjust my blur. Let's look at how much effect is happening. Yeah, maybe I want to make this a bit bigger. Cool, I can look at this in fact and adjust this. Cool, and then I would export this to actually need a file out here, and we'll call this Zane's demo. Where's this going? Renaissance comp, blah 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 blah. Yep, cool, and we'll put that .tiff. Okay, and we're going to save this as TIFF using LZW compression. Cool. Now I can go render file out node and it will spit that out to disk. Alright, so what I might do now is I might just find another image and we'll have a bit of a play around with it. And how long have we been going? 40 minutes. So I might just what have we got here? Okay, so here's the same result. So let's pop that into Photoshop. Okay, and I'm just going to go through a couple basic little ones that you probably use on a regular basis. First thing is, you'll quite often find that renders that come out of CAD programs are a little too crisp. Okay, if we look at any other image, they're never this crisp. Okay, so let's have a look at our reference pictures. Okay, if we zoom in on one of these, nothing is always really crisp. In fact, see, this one's got a little bit of JPEG compression in it. Okay, this is a very good photo, but the edges are not like that. Okay, real solid edges. So quite often what I'll do is a blur, but I'll only do a little blur. Oh, actually, sorry, this is 16-bit. The only reason I would ever do a 16-bit is if I wanted to tweak the colors a lot. It does make the file size much larger, and you'll find that a lot of things don't work. Blur does though. However, what I would normally do is about a 0.5 pixel blur, and let's just zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so if I switch this on and off, see, it just it's barely blurring it, but it just adds a whole level of realism to it. Some of these flowers down here start to really become realistic. I might have to zoom in a bit more because I don't know how much of that's getting lost. Okay, but also, and that's just a half pixel blur. So it's a very subtle blur. You don't want to overdo it. Another one that I'll quite often do is I'll add noise to it. Okay, so as you saw, I've shown you already the lens blur, but quite often I'll just add a new layer, and we'll just make sure this is black and white, and go render, noise, add noise. No, actually, sorry, I go render difference clouds. I think we'll do it. Select all. Filter, render. I think it's difference clouds, is it? Select all. That's a bit weird. Oh, sorry, I've tried doing render clouds then. Yeah. and then go filter, noise, add noise. Okay, and I'm just going to make this real noisy. Something like that, right? You can play around with this uniform Gaussian monochromatic thing. And then now you can either do multiply or screen. Okay, I typically would do multiply, and then fade it out to about 5%. Okay. Again, doesn't look like much. However, it just adds a whole level of realism to it, and so you'll get rid of any really, see this flat color here? Okay, it's completely flat. Nothing is completely flat white, you know. So it's just adding that little bit of extra detail on top. And in actual fact, I'm just going to select all, copy. I have actually got a much less destructive way of doing that blur. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll do the blur after everything. Now what I'm going to do is go select all. I've just lost my thing. Copy paste, right? So I've just duplicated this. If you go smart objects, convert to smart object. This is a very handy tip, this one. It takes a while. But now, if you go and do something like a blur, right, and go OK, it's editable. Look at this. I can actually come back here and change it. And go OK, double click on it, and reduce it again. So that's quite handy. However, it's not what I actually wanted to do. So that's what a smart object is. However, what I actually wanted to do though was go file, noise. Oh, actually, sorry, image. Actually, I will do it. I'll convert it to a smart object. And then I'm going to add the noise. No, I have to add it over the top, don't I? Actually, I'll just add it like this. This is another non-destructive way of doing it. Okay, so again, I'm adding. You want it so you just don't quite notice it. Okay, so that's 2.5%. Okay, and then we'll do the blur.
New data received.
Okay, 0.4 pixel blur. Alright, so now you can kind of see before and after. So we've already just added a whole sort of level of realism to it. Alright. That's kind of what we'd expect to see. Alright. Next thing I'll do is we'll vignette it. So vignettes are great for what do you call it? Kind of bringing attention to the center of the object, the center of the scene. So if I want to kind of really bring attention to my scene, what I'll do, I'm just using a great big brush here. Okay, and this is on the mask. Okay, so it's basically creating a selection. So. And I'll just draw this around the whole area. Be careful if you've got really highlights, like if the sun was over in the corner here, you probably don't want to vignette the sun. It'll look a bit weird. This is how I usually operate. Okay, I'll just invert this and get the kind of shape that I want. I know it looks really crude. Actually, I might just bring some of that back. X will invert your brush size. And we'll just bring that around there like that. And then I just go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Pump this right up. Cool, okay. Turn off our mask mode, here we go. And now I'm just going to grab an exposure filter effect down here and drop this right down. Oops, my mask's around the wrong way, not a problem. Just select and go Command I will invert. Okay. So now I can vignette it. Cool. I could add another layer of noise over this if I wanted to, but already you can see the original and the final, and it's looking a lot more realistic. Usually I find that if you don't quite notice it, you've probably got it bang on. Okay, you can really see the concrete and things like that. If you wanted to do that effect where I was darkening the concrete, you can have a crack at it. It is a matter of just finding the edges on over here. Except for I don't really have it, do I? I also do, because I've got one that I baked earlier. Where are we? Normals, reflections, shadows, material IDs. I think that's what I'm after. This one. Pop that into Photoshop. Where's my Photoshop icon? There it is. Select all, copy. Just pop back into here, paste. It's not exactly the same resolution, is it? Isn't quite going to work, but that's alright. It's not snapping for some reason. It's meant to. Okay, and so then I go select, color range, etc., etc. No. That hasn't come through very good, does it? Probably because it's been up-resed. Okay, so there's that. Okay. Copy, edit, paste in place, because we don't want this thing to move. Alright. Then I'm going to go filter, stylize, find edges. See, now this is the problem I have with the find edges, is that it's got no control over it. So what am I meant to do with it? I don't know. And I don't think there's any other way of doing it in here. Don't know if you just keep going find edges, maybe. Just keep going command F. Yeah, not cool. It's finding the edges and the compression. So there's not a lot we can really do with that. I would actually probably have to do it some other way. And maybe that is just using this, going select color range. Oops, I'm going to turn that back on. Select color range. And I would probably, so if I go and do that right, okay. Switch that off. I would probably actually just go through now and burn this image. In fact, I'll just do it with the background image. So the burn tool, which is this guy here, will darken things. See, so as I go through here, see it's darkening. If I just increase, I'm just going to increase this. Actually, let's go to the highlights. We'll just take some of the highlights off. See, it's like darkening it, and of course, it's only going to darken in the area that I have selected. So it's going to be a little bit more, a little bit slower.
New data received.
Oops. But I got, relatively good control. I'll probably need a bit more of a softer brush than that. Maybe increase it a bit. Oh, not that big. There we go. Cool. And so now I can darken up those edges. So you can see how convenient it is having these masks and stuff. Okay, so you can see sort of how much of an effect it has. That's quite good, eh? Yeah, anyway, I hope you've learnt something. Alright, so we're going to do depth of field, okay, or a depth of field effect within view. And you might be wondering why you'd want to do that. I just showed you how to do it in Photoshop using the Z depth, which was very effective, and you can adjust it afterwards, and it's got its good points. However, it's not a true depth of field effect, and what I mean by that is there's a few little drawbacks. The main one being if you're looking through a glass block, for example, okay, or a window, or anything that's transparent, is that the depth. So if I have a look at this, right? Oh, hang on, I'm just gonna give this a glass texture. Okay. Now the depth in here, okay, it looks as if, well, you'd almost guess what it would look like. We should see a mid-grey tree, right? However, if I bring up the Z depth, of course, the depth through my image, it's hitting the block, and that's as far as we can go. So if I was to blur this light grey area, I'd end up blurring that tree, but the rest of the tree on this side would be perfectly in focus if I was focusing, let's say, on the foreground. And so it completely ruins the effect, if you like. The other one as well is that if I had an object that was in the foreground and I defocus it, if I'm not focused on it, quite often you'll see almost around it. You would have seen this effect, for example, a camera looking through a chain link fence, and the camera will focus on the fence. You can see the fence quite clearly, and then it focuses on the background, and the fence almost completely disappears. Okay, the camera's completely focused through it. If we did it in Photoshop, we just would never get that effect. We can't see what's behind the fence. We can have a blurred sort of effect, but it's not going to, see objects behind it. Alright, so here's a foreground element. I might just change the ground plane to a checkerboard. This one's flat gauge checkerboard, that's what I want. I'm just going to scale it up a bit as well. There we go. So that looks kind of like that. Okay, so we should be able to see a bit more depth in here. Actually, I might just make that 0.25. It should be about half the size. There we go. Alright. And we'll stick something way off in the background, Let's stick a hill way off in the background. Alright. Okay, so let's have a look. If we right click on our camera settings, we'll have to change this to user settings because I want to play around with all of these different types of things in here. A lot of this, you can have a play around with it. A lot of it's pretty obvious. Apply materials. If you don't apply materials, guess what? You get a completely white render. It's quite handy actually if you ever want to do white renders of your model. Oh man, sorry. You can just turn the materials off and everything turns white. Pretty cool, eh? Still obeys the alpha channels. But you don't actually have to remove any textures. We've got shadows, reflections, transparency. There's a few settings in here on how accurate these are, and we're going to actually have a look at this. But what we're interested in is this depth of field, okay? And there is a couple of options in here. Distributed ray tracing, hybrid 2.5D, and fast 2.5D. We're going to start with 2.5D, which is actually, now when they say 2.5D, that sounds kind of strange, right? You got 2-dimensional and you got 3-dimensional. What the hell's 2.5D? If you think of the terrain model that we see is kind of 2.5D. It's not 3-dimensional. You can't have overhangs. It's basically a 2-dimensional image with heights on it. So a height map is considered 2.5D. It's not true 3D, but it's not 2-dimensional either, and it's not 3-dimensional, so it's kind of this in-between thing. And that is what we're doing with our Z depth to do the blur. And so this will actually replicate exactly the same thing as what we do in Photoshop. Now the cool thing with this, I mean, it's like you hit render and away it will go. It'll be relatively fast. First we just got to set up our camera to do depth, because at the moment everything's in focus, right? If we change this to target mode, we'll see our little target here. I'm just going to zoom all the way in. Okay, so here's our scene right in the foreground here. I might actually spread this out a little bit more. Oh, that'll be right. So let's say we're going to focus on this tree in the background, right? I might just add a few more trees in here as well, just to make it a bit more interesting. This is my kind of putu. These are like, kind of look like a putukawa if they're way off in the distance and a bit buried. One day I'm going to build a really nice putukawa and tree, what's it called, the plant factory, but until then, this is my kind of putu. Alright. And let's stick another tree about here somewhere. Alright, so we've got a few things that we can sort of focus on. Maybe another one over here. Chin. Alright. And let's just go back to that camera. So we've got that set up. Oh, the only thing I have to do now is set this blur percentage. As you increase that, see this little thing here? Okay, if I go down, it will get wider. Oops. Okay, what that's saying is that this area will be in focus. Okay? So in theory, this tree here will be in focus, everything else will be out of focus. Alright, so let's hit render. Actually, I'll render this to screen and do it about that size and hit render. So, and here we go. Now look what happened. Okay, so this is doing the same thing as what we do in Photoshop, and this part of the tree is in focus, but when we look through the glass it's not in focus. In fact, everything's out of focus. This tree here is out of focus. We can kind of see a little bit behind it. It's not too bad, but it's actually using the Z depth, and if we look at that Z depth you can see why. See, we're focusing on this tree here, but this glass block, because it's close to the camera, is kind of getting in the way. Oops. So let's have a look. If we go to distributed ray tracing and we hit OK and we hit render, now what it's doing is it's actually firing rays into our scene in a much more realistic manner, in the same way that light kind of scatters off an object and travels through the air into our camera, and we focusing certain rays onto a sensor. This is doing exactly the same sort of thing. So in this case, now you can see that even though we're looking through the glass, okay, which is transparent, this tree in the background is still in focus. You probably also notice that it's taking a little bit longer. Now at the moment it's got a relatively low quality to it as well, but I'll show you how we can improve that. You'll also notice though our rendering time just changed quite significantly. Okay, so that was 47 seconds. That one's 11 seconds. So huge difference, okay, in render time. And in some cases you actually see that this actually looks almost better, okay, but doesn't work with the glass. Okay, over here it's looking a bit, well, a bit weird really. It's looking all kind of pixelated in a way, and that's because it's firing a whole bunch of rays into the scene. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses, and so it's getting a bit noisy. If we fire more and more rays into the scene, we're going to get a better output. So how do we do that? Well, actually, see down here we've got no, hang on, where is it? Subrays, transparency, reflections, maximum trace, internal reflection level. Hang on, gotta find it. Actually, this here, okay, this is hybrid 2.5D, and it does kind of a bit of both. This is a relatively new feature, and it actually has quite a good effect. So you'll notice, see, it's just doing a normal pass like we saw before. Alright, and again, we've got this glass problem. To be honest, I think the fast one looks good, but yeah, you can see down through here, this is much better. Okay, so far probably the best result. However, look at this, and this is exactly what I was talking about with we can't see behind an object. Okay, here we can. Okay, so we can see through. Here we can't, because there's an image there. You know, we can't see through it. We're just blurring that image. We can't see what's behind it. Okay, these other two have done a much better job at seeing through objects or through foreground objects, but not so great a job in this area. So got pros and cons. How long did this one take? 51 seconds. So far that one that last one was the slowest, better effect through here. This one here is probably the most accurate and didn't take too long. And that one's the quickest, but still a bit ugly. Interesting. Okay.
New data received.
Let's just have a look in here. Hang on, I'm just going to remember where we do this. I think it's in here. How many rays that we're going to fire into our scene. Sub-rays per pixel. Object anti-aliasing. No, I think it must be here. Custom settings, indirect lighting, volumetrics. There's lots of stuff you can play around with. Usually you don't have to play with this unless you start getting sort of things that start flickering around and doing odd things. Then you have to sort of start coming in here. Photon maps have got a lot to do with the radiosity settings, custom photo gathering options, custom caustics. We haven't even gotten to that, have we? Or did we? No, we did a little bit of caustics, didn't we, when we talked about glass. Hang on, I'm going to fire some more rays into my scene. Actually, we'll also put texture anti-aliasing on. And I'm going to increase the number of sub-rays. And we'll go like this. Okay. This is going to take a lot longer to render, by the way. And hit OK, and we'll hit render. Oh, hang on, sorry, I forgot to change something else. Let's just change back to our distributed ray tracing. Alright, so now you can see this took a lot longer. The effect is by far the best so far. However, we took almost 3 minutes to render this image, but look at the difference. Okay, so that was with a lower sub-ray count, and this is with a higher sub-ray count. Okay, and you can really see a lot of this noise is now disappearing out of it. Okay, so there's the fast distributed ray tracing. Okay, that was the hybrid one. So you can see we've got all sorts of different results here. So basically what it boils down to is how much render time you can afford, but you can definitely see that this is looking pretty awesome. You can see how we're actually defocusing. We can actually see through this plant. Okay, can't do that here. Okay, well, that's distributed as well. Okay, again, we're kind of working. That one's not too bad. You could probably improve on that. So let's have a look at how we do that. So if we go and use actually I might just go down to here and we'll just put that back to about, I can't remember what it was on, somewhere down here, right? What the sub-ray, that means that for each pixel it's going to fire a minimum of 8 rays, okay, or you know, like tracing the rays of light, between 8 and 15, okay, rays into each. So as we increase this, that means it's firing more and more rays into the image. Now you're going to wonder, well, why would you want to do that? well, because if you fire a ray, let's say you had a checkerboard that was miles away, you fire a ray into it, you got a 50-50 chance of hitting a black or a white pixel. Now, what happens if you only keep hitting the black pixels and you keep missing the white pixels because of your resolution? The image is going to be looking black. So you start firing more and more rays into it. Eventually what's happening, it's going to go, well, I'm hitting black, I'm hitting white, I'm hitting black, and you'll actually get a grey look, which is true. If you look at a black and white grid like this from a long way away, it's going to appear to be grey. So that's why you need to fire more sub-rays per pixel. Anti-aliasing is going to smooth off the edges, and there's a few different ways of doing that. And so, yeah, it's up to you. I quite like the blurred one. It looks quite good for foliage. It just looks a little bit more realistic. But hang on, I'll just cancel that. But we'll play around with that. Maybe later on today or in another session. So let's just go and drop this back down. Okay. This time we're going to use this one. We're going to use that fast hybrid again, but this time we're going to increase the number of passes. So this is actually going to do multiple renders to do our depth of field effect. Okay, so it's doing like multiple renders over the top of each other. And eventually, once it's finished, we're at 80, 90, 100. Okay, and here's our finished result. Now this was relatively fast. Okay, that was 40 seconds. Okay, again, yes, we have got this problem of the object behind the glass is defocused when it shouldn't be. But if we're not looking through glass, that wouldn't be an issue. But look, we can see through here quite clearly. This is looking like a really nice blur. It's happening relatively fast. Okay, it actually looks better in some ways than the distributed. Okay, and overall, it's probably a good effect if, as long as you're not looking through glass or water or something transparent. Anyway, I think that's enough about that at this stage. Have a good play around with it. Depth of field is really a really cool effect, bringing attention to an object or something, and I highly recommend it as a tool, especially when you're trying to sort of show off an object. So yeah, let's do that. We'll drop an object in here. Actually, this is my view extreme, so it's got all of my objects in here. So I think I've got something in here. This chair, right? I designed this chair years ago. Okay, so I can grab this chair and pop it into my scene. Let's just. That must have been about the first tree, wasn't it? The second tree I created. Right. Oh, yeah. This one. Let's just move him out of the way. Let's grab that block. We'll get rid of him. Here's my chair. I'll drop that on the ground. Okay, let's just drop our camera down a little bit. Okay, and then we can get a few trees into this shot. I'm just going to be lazy and just drag a copy onto this, and let's kind of huddle these trees in a little bit more. Cool. And we'll pop something a bit more interesting on the ground. Let's have a look here. What have I got? I've got my own grass system here. Actually, seeds lawn. There we go. I'm going to use a dynamic population. I'm actually going to stick a wall in the back here. Just changes the local coordinates and stretch it. A little bit of a wall running across the back there. That'll just mean that I won't have to render so much grass when the dynamic population goes. I won't try and render it off into the distance. There we go. Something like that. They can stay that colour, that'll be fine. Alright. I just want to focus a little bit more on my chair. Okay, here's my depth of field. So, should we reduce that a little bit? Why not? So if we increase this blur, I'm going to reduce the area that's in focus. Alright, let's just flick the target to target mode and just make sure that's bang on my chair. We'll grab a couple other little plants in here, maybe some little bushes or something, pop them in the foreground. A blackberry bush, that sounds interesting. Let's shrink them right down. Oops, undo. Cool, and we'll put another one over here. Alright. Okay, let's hit render. Actually, one little thing is, there is some glass in this. I just remembered that chair has some glass panes. Glass panes in the back of it. So that's not going to quite work. Yeah, well. Alright, so there's our fast blur. But yeah, another thing actually as well, it's not going to blur reflections. Fortunately, I don't think I can really see the reflections, because again, if you're going to a depth, okay, if I was looking at a mirror, for example, the depth to the mirror is going to dictate the blur, when in actual fact, the blur in the mirror is, if you trace the rays, is to the object, not the mirror. So that depth effect, yeah, wouldn't work with shiny objects, you know, the fast or the hybrid, or the Photoshop blurring isn't going to work for mirrors and reflective materials as effectively as the ray trace one. I'm going to pause the video and I'll do the ray trace one so you can compare. So that was 1 minute 37 compared to, let's just set this up, edit, I'm going to go for the distributed ray trace, and I'm going to increase my sub rays again. I'm going to go quite high this time because I want to get a really good looking render. And while I go and have a drink of coffee, I'll leave this rendering. I'm not quite sure what this is, but let's increase this as well. These settings here are actually, when you go final, broadcast, superior, ultra, etc., it's changing all of these settings as well. Quality threshold, I don't know. Recompute textile subrays, no idea. Let's go for it. If you have a look in the manual, you can usually find out what these things mean. Alright, let's go with that. And I'm just going to pause the video and let that go. Anyway, see you soon. Alright, so 1 hour and 47 minutes later, we have this. So we'll just go OK on that. So that was the fast one, and that's the really good one with all the settings turned up to 12. Okay, you can see much better depth of field. It looks like a real depth of field effect. Anyway, I think that's enough about that. Till next week. Laters.